Hello, COS supporters, and welcome to a special edition of COS Live. My name is Andrew Lusch, and I'm joined by Rita Peters, who's the Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs. Rita, great to be back with you early in the morning. We got some committee action coming up in just a few moments. It's great to be with you. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Andrew. It's earlier for you than it is for me. But I have to say, I'm really happy you're back because I've done a couple of these now without you, and you always have a good, reason when you're not here. But I miss you when you're not here. It gets a little bit lonely without you. So glad to be joining you today.
It's great to be with you too, Rita. It's always on the earlier coverage when I'm unable to be here because I'm still asleep. Like you,
Yeah.
turning into a pumpkin late at night. I'm still a pumpkin in these early hearings. So we do have a subcommittee hearing coming up in Iowa, and it's in the state government committee. And our bill is HJR 6. Just to get our viewers caught up, though, 19 states have already passed our Convention of States resolution, which of course would cover three topics: fiscal restraints, term limits on elected officials, and also reining in, clawing back some of that power that the federal government has taken away from the states. So redefining where power is held. Anyway, 34 states is the number that we need. 15 states have already passed our resolution. So we're more than halfway there. And more, we just need 34 to start discussing these solutions to all of the big problems in Washington, D.C. Okay, so 19 states have passed. We have several states that are looking at our resolution this year, and we're going to be focusing on Iowa today. Rita, can you get our viewers caught up with what's going to be happening in Iowa today?
Absolutely. Well, just a little bit of background first. Last week, a subcommittee of the Iowa House State Government Committee heard public testimony, including from Senator Rick Santorum, and they advanced our resolution to the full committee. We got placed on the agenda for the full committee for the very next day, which was a good sign, but they simply ran out of time before they got to COS last week. So here we are exactly 1 week later before this full Iowa House State Government Committee. Now, again, last week's subcommittee hearing was when they took public testimony. We heard from our Iowa team. No opponents testified, even though that would have been their time to testify against COS. It was all just supporters for Convention of States. So today there will be no public testimony, only the legislators discussing and asking questions and debating about the merits of our COS application. This is a unique feature of the Iowa legislature compared to how other states process bills and resolutions. Usually the full committee is where the citizens have an opportunity to testify. But in Iowa, again, testimony is held at the subcommittee level. So no testimony today, just the legislators on this committee talking about our Article 5 application. And then the vote they'll take isn't necessarily a demonstration of whether they support it. The vote is whether to forward it to the full Iowa House of Representatives for a fuller debate and a vote by the entire House. So little more background: on January 29th, a subcommittee on the Senate side of the Iowa legislature advanced our Senate resolution to the full committee there. And that Senate full committee has not taken action yet. We are still pending there. So today we're on the House side. If there is a successful vote, then our Article 5 application, HJR 6, will go to the full Iowa House for debate and a vote. And Andrew, we have more than 56,000 Iowans who have signed the Convention of States petition asking their state legislators to vote yes for COS. Team COS Iowa has held town halls and some impressive Capitol rallies to boost the effort there. And they've acquired endorsements from influential Iowans, including Blaze TV's Steve Deace and Bob Vanderplatz of the Family Leader. Actually, the Family Leader, a representative from that organization, came and testified in support. I think that was at the Senate subcommittee hearing, but that was great to see their vocal support before the subcommittee. Last year in Iowa, we had successful votes in committee, but were never scheduled for a floor vote. So we got stalled out. And this year, the Iowa team is working hard to get farther ahead and push their state across that finish line. Now, stay tuned, everyone, after the hearing because we are hoping to get a recap and on the ground reaction from Regional Director Catherine Zamanek, who is an Iowa native. We might also hear from Karen Schuster, it's Karen, not Catherine, who's an Iowa native, and I believe she's on the ground there. So it's a little bit confusing. Catherine Zamanek is our regional director for Iowa, but Karen Schuster, who is a regional director for another group of states, some past states, she is an Iowa native and has been a volunteer and leading this Iowa effort for many years. So we do expect to hear from her. I know she's been working hard. I can also tell you that Senator Rick Santorum was in Des Moines yesterday, just meeting with some of the legislators, answering their questions, providing them with correct, accurate, historical, and legal information about this Article 5 process to calm any fears they may have, again, answer their questions and give them good information. So looking forward to hopefully seeing that pay off in the full committee today.
Wow, go Iowa. 56,000 petition signatures, all of those endorsements, and great volunteers on the ground who are just leading the charge. And go Karen Schuster, who's on the ground. And of course, go Rick Santorum, doing all the yeoman's work over there to get our legislation across the finish line. Rita, I am always in awe how you keep it all straight with where we're at and the process, and not just for Iowa, but for all of the states where our resolution is working through the legislature. It's just so amazing how you keep it all straight, especially on weeks like this when it is so busy. Today is going to be a doozy. There's lots of legislative action that's happening all across the country. Of course, we're anticipating Wyoming. That's coming up soon too. And then there's all of the other action that we've had recently. Can we comment on while we wait, can we comment on a few other things that's going on right now across the country with our legislation?
Absolutely. But Andrew, you give me way too much credit. We need to give credit where credit is due. Producer G has a cheat sheet for me. And without that, I definitely could not keep it all straight. But yeah, let's talk about some of the other things that have been happening. Was it this week? No, I think it was last week. I've lost track of the days. The days all run together for me. But we did have a successful vote in the Wyoming House Education Committee. That was a vote of 6-3. We were surprised that the vote was that strong. We thought it was going to be a little bit tighter in that committee. They heard public testimony from our amazing Wyoming grassroots team led by the incomparable Julie Baker. They also heard from Senator Rick Santorum. They always are excited to get him speaking to them. And so I know that was great for them this morning. And we didn't stream this because it was a very, very brief. But one of our Ohio Senate sponsors, Senator Michelle Reynolds, introduced our COS resolution to the Ohio Senate Committee that will be considering it. Now, Ohio is another state that has really unique process compared to the rest of the states in that Ohio can have up to 4 committee hearings on a single bill or resolution. They usually start just by having the sponsor introduce the resolution to the committee and explain what it is. So that's all that happened this morning in Ohio. Usually the second committee will be for only proponent testimony. A third hearing is usually held to take opponent testimony. And then often there's a fourth hearing that's open to whoever, wants to say one last word about it. They don't usually let people come back who have already testified at one of the other hearings for that, but it is sort of a, last shot and kind of closing testimony. And then at some point after that, the committee votes. So it is a long, drawn out process in Ohio. They are pretty much a year-round legislature, so they have time to do that. But first step, again, completed there this morning in the Ohio Senate for us. Now, today, as I mentioned earlier, maybe earlier in the week even, we have a marathon day today at 2:30 Eastern time. I hope you'll be able to tune in again, because the Nebraska unicameral legislature will hear public testimony on LR 14. And that's basically a reintroduction of our COS application. Of course, Nebraska has already passed the application. They're one of our 19 states, but their application had a sunset clause on it. And we still have a couple more years before that sunset clause would cause our Nebraska application to expire. But our team is being proactive, and we're hoping to pass a clean application this year that, again, would take away that sunset. The committee that will hear that today at 2:30 will also hear a 34 ready bill that, again, sort of sets up the process for how Nebraska would choose and then oversee its commissioners to an Article 5 convention. Mark Meckler is on the ground right now in the Nebraska unicameral. So if you tune back in this afternoon, you should get to see Mark testify. That is always a treat. And we haven't seen a whole lot of Mark this year because it's been mostly Rick Santorum and Mike Ferris, but I always love watching Mark do his thing. He's really good at it. And then finally, I'm still just on today, later today, we expect the full Kansas Senate to debate on the COS resolution. They won't take final action today, provided things go well today. They'll just debate. There may be a formality vote, like a voice vote, to go into tomorrow. And then tomorrow is when we do expect to have final debate and final vote in the Kansas Senate. And timing is always uncertain with floor debates because a Senate or a House in the legislature will have a very long calendar typically this time of year, and we don't know exactly how long it takes for them to get through all the bills, but we'll be watching it. So just kind of stay tuned. Check out our YouTube or Rumble or conventionofstates.com/COS live, and we'll keep you posted. And then one more thing for this week. It is possible that we will get a Wyoming House floor vote this week. Could happen as early as today, but Andrew, I've seen that Wyoming House calendar today, and it is long, and I don't think they're going to get to us today. But there's an outside chance. If it doesn't happen today, could happen tomorrow. So just, again, stay tuned. And for Wyoming, Andrew, this is going to be the final vote that, if successful, would make Wyoming state number 20 to pass our COS application. We've already passed the Senate there. Okay, one more thing about this week, as far as I know so far. Thursday, in addition to that Kansas Senate vote, that's, tomorrow, Thursday, we're expecting a vote in Rhode Island, a committee hearing on our COS application, and hopefully a vote there in that committee. So, Andrew, I hope you were, writing all that down. It's a lot.
I got it all up here. No, I don't, Rita. I don't know how you do it. Again, it's you and Gary.
Yeah, producer G. Yeah,
producer G in the background, just always making sure everything runs so smoothly. You said it's like a marathon. I would say it's like a sprint within a marathon within another marathon, because this whole month has felt like a marathon, and last month felt like a marathon too. So, but it's great. It's a good marathon to be in. It's so amazing to see all of our legislation and where it's popping up and how we're just gaining traction all across the country. And our volunteers, they are the driving force of this, Rita. So just a huge shout out to all of them and all of the relationships that they've been building year after year with legislators to make sure that our COS application gets into the legislature, or to our 34 Ready bill, which is pretty new. It's great to see that we have so many states that are introducing 34 Ready, which, like you said, it kind of lays out the process and how commissioners will get selected for a convention. So this is super, super exciting to hear, Rita. Well, I don't see producer G pulling us into the committee just yet. So I guess we have a little bit more time to kind of talk about these things. But it is just incredible to see, especially compared to last year, Rita. We are just running. It's like been a sprint this entire last 2 months. How are you holding up? I know I'm struggling to keep it up, but how are you holding up with all this?
It's day to day. And Andrew, I couldn't do it without you. I think it actually is so helpful that we're in different time zones. I'm on Eastern time zone. Are you in Pacific?
Yeah, I'm in
Actually,
Pacific.
yeah. So we're at the, opposite sides of the country, opposite time zones, and it works great because there have been a couple of times when I've said, "Hey guys, I got to go make dinner for my family," and then Andrew can take over. Or if we're having a committee that's 7:00 a.m. for Andrew, then I'm able to do it. But I'm glad we have a little bit more time because I realize, Andrew, there was one more committee hearing that's actually happening today that I didn't mention. We're not planning to live stream it because there won't be public testimony. But in Maryland, the great state of Maryland, they will be hearing 34 Ready legislation there. And typically at the committee hearing in Maryland, our team has been given the opportunity to testify. And Andrew, that Maryland team shows up in such force that I'm kind of suspicious that maybe that's actually why they're not letting them all testify today, because it takes so long. We have so many people in Maryland, and Maryland is such a tough state, or has been, at least for our COS application, because there are some people in the Maryland legislature who don't necessarily think it's a good thing to put additional restraints on the federal government. Some of us disagree with them. But again, it might be a different situation in Maryland this year, because what they're moving forward with this year, instead of our COS application, is the procedural piece, the 34 Ready legislation that, again, would just prepare the state as to how it's going to choose, instruct, and oversee delegates to an Article 5 convention, to any Article 5 convention, no matter what the purpose of it is. So, yeah, like I said, this is a little bit of an unprecedented thing for the Maryland committee hearing. I'm hoping to dive in, once we come up for air for after this week, and figure out why they didn't let our team, aren't letting our team testify today, and whether there will be a different date when our team gets to testify, because those Maryland folks are great. They know their stuff. They're organized, articulate, and professional. And I always love watching them do their thing. So didn't mean to slight Maryland, but that's what's happening in Maryland today.
I'm going to say it's because they're afraid of us and they don't want to hear the truth. Because like you said, the Maryland team, they're in the belly of the beast. And there's plenty of people in Maryland who maybe don't want to see the federal government rolled back, and they don't want to see term limits and spending cuts and all of that stuff. But go Maryland. I have to agree with you, Rita. That team is just amazing. I remember they were one of the early teams to introduce 34 Ready, if I remember correctly, because they've done it in years a previous year. And they're just such an incredible team. And, shout out to Steve Patton. He's on the national staff, and he's out there going to the Capitol with the Maryland team as well. And man, it's great to see how they show up in force, despite how difficult of a hill they have to climb in that state. And, Rita, it's great that Maryland does this, but it's not unique to Maryland. We see states all across the nation where we have a huge hill to climb, where our volunteers, they show up in force, despite how difficult it might be, because our mission is not just getting the resolution passed and introduced, our mission is about growing grassroots. We want to grow the strongest grassroots army that this country has ever seen. And we want to point that grassroots army at getting our resolution passed in 34 states so that we can call the first ever Article 5 convention of states. So this just gives me so much energy seeing whether it's red state or blue state, purple state, we don't care. We have grassroots people on the ground who are doing the work and who are actual citizen activists who are fighting for this. So it's just incredible to see that.
Well, Andrew, if anybody knows about state teams that have a tough uphill climb, it would be you, because you happen to be a regional director. We don't talk about this a lot on the program, but you are a regional director for a bunch of blue states on the western side of the country. And I know it's tough, and I just really admire those grassroots volunteers for what they do. As you pointed out, Andrew, our mission is about building a grassroots army of self-governing citizen activists. And part of that involves going to their legislature and being engaged with what's happening there. No matter which party controls the legislature, right? You need to be engaged, you need to be informed, stand up, show up, speak up, and that's what our teams are doing. And Andrew, I just realized I didn't say anything yet about our Iowa sponsors. While we're still waiting for this committee to get to our resolution HJR 6, just wanted to mention and give a shout out to our amazing House sponsor there, Representative John Wills. He is a true champion for Convention of States, has been for a long time. Again, he's the lead sponsor on our House application. And I should mention that in talking with Senator Rick Santorum yesterday, after Rick had spent the day in Des Moines talking to legislators, trying to get some more on board whose votes we will need to pass in the House, he said to me, you know, the person out there doing the work for us, actually our sponsor, Representative John Wills, working really hard to get this through in Iowa. So I want to give a shout out to him. Also want to give a shout out to Representative Megan Jones in the Iowa House. We met with her over the summer at an NCSL conference, and she hadn't been a strong supporter of COS in the past. After talking to her, Rick Santorum, Mike Ferris, Mark Meckler came to find out that she had some concerns over the procedures being unknown for how the delegates would be selected, who would choose them, how would they be governed throughout the convention. So after meeting with her and coming to understand that, she was really eager to work with us on putting together a 34 ready legislative package for Iowa. So Representative Megan Jones is the sponsor of our 34 ready bill that I believe is also going to be heard in this full committee today. It passed in subcommittee the same day as HJR 6, our COS application. So we should hear the committee consider and debate and vote on that as well today. But big shout out to Representative Megan Jones for learning what she needed to know and then doing what she needed to do to be comfortable with this process. And she's become a huge COS supporter through that effort. So really grateful for her. Senator Jesse Green on the Senate side has the companion version of that 34 ready bill. And then Senator Schultz is our primary sponsor on the Senate side of our COS application. So just want to give a shout out to those folks because they do carry the water for our organization, for the grassroots in Iowa who want this to happen. And we're really grateful for them.
That's amazing. Thanks for kind of giving our viewers some of the behind the scenes stuff that's happening with our sponsors and everything. Rita, we're still waiting for the committees to get to our resolution. So I think we got a little bit of time to look at a few things that happened last week. I think the first thing, if our viewers missed it, was Rick Santorum and several of our volunteers and Mark Meckler and several others on national staff were over at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and we were there to really talk a lot about Convention of States and Article 5 and how we need to remove a sunset provision that's on our resolution that passed in the Texas legislature several years ago. Producer G has a clip ready of Senator Santorum delivering a speech at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which we'll roll here in a second. But Rick Santorum, he is just everywhere. He has been, I mean, I don't know how he does it, how it's from one state to the next, and he just keeps going like an Energizer bunny. It's amazing to see. And he always, every time he comes, and he just is such an inspiration. I mean, I've heard him speak, 4 times, 5 times now, and each time I'm more wowed than the last time. I mean, that's just how good he is when he's in front of legislators or when he is in front of people like at Texas Public Policy Foundation. Producer D, do you have that clip ready?
Our founders created a constitution that put the states at the top of the food chain. That is not the constitution we live under today. The constitution that was created by the founders, remember, the states came together and founded the country and founded the Constitution, and the states were the ones who were supposed to be the government that interacted with the people. The federal government was to be this far-off place that dealt with national security and borders and things like that. But that has fundamentally changed. When people say, oh, don't mess with the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution's been messed with. This Constitution that people walk around and show is not the same Constitution that our founders created. If you ask for a copy of the Constitution from the General Printing Office in Washington, D.C., you won't get this. You know what you'll get? 2,600 pages. Because that is, people say, oh, we ignore the Constitution. No, Congress doesn't ignore the Constitution. They actually abide by the Constitution as amended by hundreds, if not thousands, of Supreme Court decisions. The left doesn't amend the Constitution by going through a process that's bottom up that requires every state to pass a resolution and 38 states to ratify an amendment. They do it by getting 5 justices on the Supreme Court. And they believe in a living, breathing Constitution that changes at any time they want. We don't believe that. We believe in a Constitution that is representative of the values of our country. And we need the states to reassert themselves in this country. And there's no state that leads better than Texas. Texas passed our resolution to call for a convention of states to do 3 things. They passed it 8 years ago. To do 3 things. Number 1, limit the jurisdiction of the federal government, put fiscal limitations on the federal government, and put term limits on potentially all federal office holders, including the deep state. You passed that, but you also passed it with a sunset clause, which sunsets now. So the state, if you're going to maintain your leadership that you are so proud of, we need to get to it. And so I would encourage each and every one of you. There's a little handout there on your tables. There is a petition that you can sign right here. You can sign it, or you can go to the QR code in the back and you can do it online. If you're listening on streaming, you can go to cosaction.org and sign up and sign the petition and let your legislators here in Texas know that this is a priority issue. We need to continue to lead. 19 other states have passed this resolution. We are working in about a half dozen states right now to add to that number. This is something that can happen and must happen. Here's why. There are lots of reasons, but here's what I fear most as someone who's been around Washington for years. Here's what will happen when the Democrats take control of the Senate the next time. What will happen is, and by the way, the presidency of the House, I assume they get all 3 of them, which could happen, candidly, in 3 more years. We know, because they've said it, that they will eliminate the filibuster in the United States Senate. That means they'll be able to pass anything with simply 51 votes in the Senate and 218 votes in the House and have a president sign it. And I guarantee you the first thing they will do is pack the United States Supreme Court. You worry about losing the Second Amendment? Imagine 13 justices on the court, 8 of which are in favor of abolishing the Second Amendment or dramatically limited it. That will happen. That will happen. They will repeal, they will get rid of every state law when it comes to election. They will pass a federal election law, and every state will have to live under California election laws. We will never have another election that's honest in this country. They will add D.C. and Puerto Rico and maybe Greenland as a state. I'm kidding about Greenland, but I'm not about D.C. and Puerto Rico. I'm telling you, they will probably get rid of the vote of the Electoral College, and they will do anything they can to do what they are focused on, which is to take and control power in Washington, D.C., to control your life. This is real, and this will happen. I have an amazing gift. I wrote a book back in 2004 called It Takes a Family in response to Hillary Clinton's It Takes a Village. And I said over the next 10, 15 years, the left was going to destroy the family, upset and destroy marriage. They were going to transform gender, and they were going to try to destroy the church and free speech. What did I get wrong? I was called an extremist. I was called an alarmist. But you know what I was? I listened to what they said they were going to do, and I believed them. This is what they're going to do. And you, Texas, need to lead the effort to stop them. So if there are any legislators in here, I know there's one who's going to follow me here, who's been a supporter, and I thank you for that, Mr. Speaker. Please sign on to this bill as a co-author. House members, senators, and please bring this thing up and get this done and show the country that Texas still wants to lead. We need you. Boy, I hate saying that, but I do. It's true. We need Texas. I know people are coming from all over the country here. There's a reason for that. You're getting bigger, you're getting stronger, but we need you to lead this country. And there is no more important. I wouldn't be here in Austin if I thought the answers were in Washington. It cannot be fixed there. No one ever came into my office when I was in the United States Senate or the House and said, please cut my program. Anybody in this room believe that we are not headed to a fiscal collapse? Raise your hand if you do not believe that. They are not going to do anything in Washington, D.C. to fix that. It has to come from you. It has to come from the people, and the mechanism that our founders put in the Constitution in Article 5 was to give you, the people and the states, the right to offer amendments to control Washington. The Constitution was about checks and balances. In 1912, you removed the check that kept Washington a backwater town with no power. And that check was having state legislators appoint United States senators. Prior to that, the entire debt of the United States was $1.50 from the Spanish-American War. There was no debt, there was no big agencies, there was no power in Washington. The Constitution was changed to allow Washington to explode. You cannot fix a structural problem without structural reform, and the structure is our Constitution. Exactly. So I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting TPPF. This is like the 4th or 5th time I've been here to speak, and I am always honored to be here. This is, again, I hate to admit it, the best public policy, state public policy foundation that has it going. And you folks, I'm counting on you to lead. Please help us. God bless.
Wow, Rita, you can always count on Rick to get the room energized. I mean, that was just a riveting speech, and I just love it. He was there, by the way, because our team in Texas is fighting hard to get rid of a sunset clause that is on our Article 5 resolution. For our viewers who maybe don't know what a sunset clause is, can we touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So you also heard us talk about a sunset clause in the state of Nebraska, which is the other state working on that this year. So if a state legislature passes an application for an Article 5 convention to propose amendments on a group of topics, like the 3 topics in our application, imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and setting term limits for federal officials. So the state legislature passes that application for a convention. If it just passes it without a sunset, like most states have done, that application doesn't expire. It stays out there and will count toward 34 applications on that topic indefinitely. However, some legislatures, for various reasons, decide to put what we refer to as a sunset clause or an expiration date right in the text of their application. And state legislatures do have the authority to do that because they control this convention for proposing amendments. They do it the way they choose to do it. So if a legislature says, yes, we want to apply for a convention on these topics, but we only want our application to be valid for, say, 5 years, then they put that sunset clause into the text of the application, and it is valid. So Texas has a sunset clause in its application that will cause the application to expire this year. I believe the date is May 4th. Unless the legislature acts to either just remove the sunset provision or they can pass an entirely new application without a sunset or with a new sunset provision if they wanted to. So that's what our Texas team is working on. As I said, our Texas application would expire in May of this year if our team is unsuccessful at getting that done. So there is some urgency to this situation in Texas. Nebraska, as I mentioned, also has a sunset provision. We have a couple more years in Nebraska, so the situation is not as urgent there, but we still, want to get that taken care of as soon as possible. So the Nebraska team is working on that, the sunset provision removal, as well as the Nebraska team is also working on 34 ready legislation to spell out the procedures and process for the unicameral to choose and instruct and oversee its commissioners to an Article 5 convention. And again, that hearing in Nebraska is expected this afternoon around 2:30. Mark Meckler is currently on the ground there working with legislators there. I've been texting with him a little bit this morning. That committee vote does look tight. So he is working to nail down the votes. There's one on the committee who is, non-committal which way he's going to go, and we need his vote in order to pass. So say a prayer for Nebraska, say a prayer for Mark Meckler, who's working hard out there right now. And, we call them our headliners, Andrew, Rick Santorum, Michael Ferris, Mark Meckler. They work so hard going all around the country because they are so committed to using this process to save our republic and to implement the permanent changes that we need to permanently limit federal power, to permanently impose fiscal restraints, and to set term limits. Those of us who believe those changes are needed, we're appreciative of those things that the Trump administration is doing right now to make some of those changes. But without a convention to propose amendments that enshrine those reforms into our Constitution, the changes that the Trump administration is able to make can be undone with the very next administration. And we don't want to see that happen, Andrew. So that's why we're passionate about this. And I know we're grateful for our headliners, right?
Right, absolutely. And I love that you bring that up, what's going on with the Trump administration and specifically Doge. Everyone is talking about Doge. I mean, you can't get on social media without seeing a post, especially if you're on X. You can't get on there without seeing something from Elon about Doge and what Doge is finding, the waste, the fraud, the abuse. And you know what's funny is we've been talking about this for years, how much the federal government is wasting our hard-earned taxpayer money. And I love that Elon is out there and kind of giving us painting a picture of how much money is actually being wasted and how much of it is going to things that are not in America's best interest. But like you said, Rita, it's only temporary. The next administration can sweep all of that away and it can go back to business as usual. And you know, DC is going to love that. They want business back to the way it used to be. So what we can do, what we're offering is something that makes it, like you said, permanent, where they can't go back to business as usual. They have to live under the Constitution, and they have to live under the amendments that would get passed and ratified out of a convention. So Doge is great. We love Doge. But 4 years from now it might not be Elon Musk anymore who's the head of Doge.
Right. Well, Andrew, if you're watching, you notice producer G took off the footage of the committee. We don't see that. What we're hearing from Karen Schuster, who's on the ground there, is that the committee went to caucus for a few minutes, which sometimes happen. It's not always convenient for us when it happens in the middle of a committee meeting. So we're going to talk for a few more minutes. I think producer G has one more video. When the committee comes back, there is only one bill ahead of ours. There's a list of subcommittee assignments, which usually just gets read through and is really perfunctory. Then there's one bill ahead of ours. So producer G might queue up a few videos for us to watch, at least one or two. But I wanted us to comment on one other thing that I'm going to bring up for our viewers, Andrew. And I know this is a favorite topic for all of us at Convention of States, but you know, you're probably like me, Andrew, in that when you tell people about what you do, you know, what is Convention of States? What are we trying to do? A common response that I get from people is like, you know, what's holding you back? Why isn't it passing in more states? And I would summarize the roadblock, the obstacle, as really people or legislators in two different camps. Of course, there's the camp of legislators who just don't really want the kind of reforms that we want to make. They don't want career politicians in Congress to be term limited. Sometimes it's because they themselves might have aspirations to go be a career politician in Congress. Some of them just really don't believe in term limits. Some of the legislators, you know, are in this camp of being opposed on principle because they like big government. They want a big centralized government to make the decisions in one place and then send out the mandates to the states and force the states to obey. Some state legislators actually support that approach and they're in favor of that. And so they, of course, don't support what we're trying to do. But the real tragedy to me, Andrew, are the legislators who are in the other camp who simply don't support Convention of States because of fear and misinformation. They're afraid of the process. And most of them are afraid simply because we've never had an Article 5 convention to propose amendments before. Now, when we give people the information that we have, which is historical precedent, case law, the text of Article 5, the meaning of the words and phrases used in Article 5, the structure of Article 5, which is also relevant. When we give people the factual, legal, all that information, most of them, you know, see it and will come on board, unless they're just paralyzed in their fear or unless they've bought into misinformation. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there about the Article 5 process that just keeps getting repeated over and over and over again. and is really frustrated. Andrew, I'm curious, what do you say to people who ask you, what's the holdup? Why haven't you gotten this done yet?
What I usually go to is something that Dennis Denton once told me, and he was the previous regional director, and I was under his wing, and he kind of guided me as an associate regional director. And then when he retired, I kind of filled in for him. Big shoes to fill. Great guy. He's still with the Virginia team. He retired and he still is volunteering with the Virginia team to help them get past there. He's just a shout out to you, Dennis. You're an amazing, amazing volunteer, and you're an amazing mentor to me. But what he had told me one time is that this is a crock pot solution. And we live in a microwave society right now, but this is a crock pot solution. And you know what? Crockpot dinners they're so much better than microwave dinners. It's just going to take time. It takes time to convince legislators in 34 states. I mean, this isn't just trying to get one bill passed in Congress or one bill passed in one state. We're taking a resolution to every single state, and we need 34 of them to agree. So this is a very, very high bar. And what's incredible from my perspective, Rita, is that we've been doing this thing for 10 years now. And we have over 2.5 million people who've signed our petition, and we're still not a household name. You don't hear us mentioned by the news on a daily basis. We're not the headline news every single day. We've been slowly working at this for 10 years, and look how far we already are halfway to the 34 that we need. And we still aren't the household name. So Mark has talked to us a lot about how we are going to grow exponentially. And as we grow exponentially, we're going to have more people on the ground who are able to talk to legislators and set the record straight, who can talk about the process, talk about the history, talk about Article 5 and the text within there, because it's as clear as day. And we have the historical record on our side. Unfortunately, our opponents, more and more, they're getting found out to be wrong, to be purposely misleading people. And the more and more we just point to the truth, and the more and more we just point to how we can solve real issues with this solution, the more people will start to come on to our side. Something that Michael Ferris once said, and this was at the summit back in 2022, he talked about how if you talk about the problem, you're going to get people on your side. If you talk about the solution, you're going to get more people on your side. But if you start talking about how this is going to benefit someone's life, you'll get even more people. And that's what we're doing at Convention of States. We've been doing that now for several years, talking about how this will solve issues that you care most about. This is going to solve the issues of keeping more of your hard-earned money in your pocket so that you can use it for your family, and getting career politicians out of Washington, D.C. so that we can make way for new blood, for new people who have great ideas and who bring character to the Congress. Yeah. And we're also talking about ideas of restoring power where it's supposed to be, with the people and with the states. The federal government, they had a few and defined powers, but for the last 100 years, Rita, they've taken more and more and more power, and now it's broad and expansive. That's the federal government now.
That's right, and undefined, right?
And undefined.
Yeah, and in some ways, effectively unlimited in a lot of ways, because of the various loopholes that have been opened to what were intended to be limits. And, one of my favorite examples is the general welfare clause. Congress has the power to tax and spend for the general welfare. Well, in, the day and age when that was written, it was understood to be, it has to be taxing and spending for the good of the whole nation, as opposed to the good of one state or region. Well, today, the way it's really interpreted, it's basically not a limitation at all. It just means if Congress thinks it's a good idea, it's for everyone's welfare. So we can do it, right? And that is where an amendment could really fix that problem. A simple amendment that clarifies that Congress may only tax and spend in pursuit of its specifically enumerated powers in Article 1. Bring clarity in black and white language. That is what I think is so needed. And, Andrew, going back to what you were saying about how long we've been working on this and how our grassroots army is growing. my hope is that the grassroots energy and hope in, having a better outcome for our nation by using this process that the Constitution gives to the state legislatures for this purpose. I'm hoping that we can embolden and empower the state legislators to step away from their fear and to act with courage and resolve to do what needs to be done for the good of this great nation. And I think it is happening. One thing I'm sure that's happening is that the legislators in every state are figuring out, Andrew, that our people don't go away. You can keep voting us down. We can lose multiple years in a row. We're not going to go away because we are committed to doing this. We believe that this is the right solution for America at the right time.
Right. Absolutely, Rita. And there are several states that come to mind when looking at that. Like take South Dakota, for example. South Dakota, several years in a row, didn't even make it out of a committee. And then this year, we got within a hair's breadth of getting South Dakota to be state number 20. And that's all due to our grassroots who just keep coming back, keep building relationships. We're just relentless when it comes to that. In my region, the state that comes to mind is Hawaii. Hawaii is a team that never, ever quits. And they just keep coming back no matter what size they have, no matter how big of a hill they have to climb. They keep coming back and they keep fighting. And under the leadership of Mark White, that team has successfully gotten through a committee, and that happened last year. We got through one of the committee hearings, which was incredible to see. You don't often see deep blue states get all the way through a committee. So man, that was just exciting to see the Hawaii team, all of the hard work that they paid off. And what was really cool about it, if it could be done in Hawaii, it could be done at any part of the country. And that's what we're doing. We're taking our message to state legislators, and we're just going to be relentless. And that's really what's going to get us to victory. Calvin Coolidge, I'm not going to do the whole quote, but he talks about how perseverance is the thing that is needed to be successful, that perseverance is above all other things. You can be smart, you can be talented, you can have all the money. None of that is going to matter if you don't have perseverance. And boy, Rita, our grassroots got oodles and oodles of perseverance.
Amen to that. They demonstrate it all the time. Well, Andrew, it looks like we're still waiting on the committee to go back in. I wonder if it might be helpful for our viewers for me to just go down a list of kind of the states that are have been hot this year, or the states that are still hot this year, and where they kind of are in the process. So South Dakota, as we have talked about, is one of our states where we did pass in the Senate this year. Unfortunately, after a victory on the House side at the committee stage, we then went on to a defeat, pretty narrow defeat in the South Dakota House. So we're done there for the year, but we are very hopeful that we have a path forward to victory in 2026. And our folks are already working to secure that path to flip the votes that we need to flip to get to yes in the South Dakota House. We're confident that the Senate will be a yes again next year. So we're looking, hopefully, to count South Dakota on our list for 2026. Wyoming, we are past the Senate in Wyoming. We passed the House committee, I believe, this week on Monday with a 6-3 vote. So a strong vote there. And we are just waiting to get on the calendar. Well, we're on the calendar in the Wyoming House, but waiting for the House to get through enough of the calendar that they will debate and vote on our resolution in Wyoming. And that would be the last stop. So a successful vote on the Wyoming House floor would make Wyoming potentially state number 20 to pass the COS application. In Kansas, as we mentioned earlier, the Kansas Senate is scheduled for, I think it's second reading today. So we do expect to have debate on our COS application in the Kansas Senate today. The vote today would not be final action. We're thinking the final action in the Senate would be tomorrow. And then, of course, the application would make its way over to the House side. As a reminder, the Kansas Constitution does have a 2/3 supermajority requirement for Article 5 applications. And we believe, and there's pretty strong case law indicating that that requirement is unconstitutional. So there's actually litigation pending in the courts in Kansas right now to determine once and for all whether that Kansas constitutional provision is any good. Now, we think that we might have a 2/3 supermajority in the Kansas Senate. So that's really the thing to be watching in these votes today and tomorrow in the Kansas Senate is we're pretty confident of having a majority. But will we have the supermajority that the Kansas Constitution purports to require there? If we do, then the Senate leader can gavel it, it passed because there's nothing standing in the way. And we're hoping that's what happens because we're waiting for the court to issue its ruling. So it's a little bit of a weird situation that we're trying to navigate, trying to thread that needle in Kansas. So it'll be interesting to see what the numbers look like on the vote. In Montana, we are sort of blocked right now in the Montana House in committee. We need to lock down about 3 more votes to get out of that committee. And our team is working that hard. They are flooding those committee members with emails and phone calls, asking them to vote yes on COS, at least to get it to the full House for a full floor debate and vote. So that's Montana. In Idaho, maybe it was last week. Somebody can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. Again, the dates kind of get lost in all the busyness, but we did pass the Idaho House Judiciary and Rules Committee. And that was, frankly, Andrew, an agonizing situation. And that was one of those times where you were handling the live stream solo because I was making dinner. I was watching the live stream of the committee while I was making dinner. And dinner was a little bit of a disaster because I kept having to be like, wait, stop everything. They're voting. They voted 3 times because there were 3 different motions made in that committee. So first it was a motion to hold the resolution in committee until a certain date. They voted on that. That failed. What was agonizing about it is that one of the committee members whom we had thought was a supporter had just given a little speech about how he was going to vote no. So I was frantically, as I'm making dinner and as I'm trying to watch what's going on, I'm frantically texting, Mark and Rick and Mike saying, oh no, one of our votes just flipped. We don't think we have the votes to get out of committee now. Mark says, I'm going to go to a quiet place and pray. I said, yes, you do that, Mark. So he went and did that. Then the committee proceeded to vote on the second motion. And the second motion was, let's just send the resolution to the floor without a recommendation. So usually it's either a do pass recommendation or it's a, don't pass. Let's just send it without any recommendation. So they start reading down the roll call for that motion. And I'm thinking, okay, yes, like we can, at least the vote who flipped on us, at least he can support this just to get it out of committee and get to the floor. So they start going down the roll. And one of our champions on that committee voted against that motion. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, like maybe he didn't understand what he was voting on. Why would he not vote to just get it out of the committee to the floor? And I heard the rest of the story later from Rick Santorum, who was in the room while this was happening. But I was just in agony. Mark still somewhere quiet praying, right? So then they finally get to the third motion, which is a do pass motion to, pass it out to the floor with a recommendation that the floor pass it. And our supporter, two of our strong supporters on that committee gave great speeches about why this was so important, why they needed to do this. They went through the roll, and our vote, who had flipped against us a few minutes ago, flipped back to our side and voted yes on the do pass. And we got out of that committee with an 8-7 do pass recommendation. But it may have taken several hours off my life expectancy. Andrew, it was agonizing.
It was several days for me.
Like for you.
Oh gosh, took several days off my life for me. That was agonizing, just trying to keep it all straight on, because there were so many motions or sub amendments or sub motions. I don't know exactly what the language they used, but anyway, and we went on the air thinking that this was that we'd gone down, and then it was a great turn of events, of course, when the chairman came back and said he had to consult Mason's rules, and then we get back and we're like, all right, yes, we have another motion, and it's for a do pass recommendation. So that was man, that really, my chest was leaping out of my heart was leaping out of my chest when we were going through that pass without no recommendation. Anyway, well, thankfully it did pass, and it is now being considered for a full floor vote. Hopefully that will be coming up soon. Rita, producer G, he has another video for our viewers, and this is just something that was played at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And if I know producer G, he made this video because he makes every single video at Convention of States. He's got so many hats that he wears, and he does every single one of his jobs just perfectly and with excellence. So we got a video that was played at TPPF that we're going to roll. Producer G, do you have that?
So SJR 2 is passed. It's adopted. Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Texas was the 11th state to pass the Convention of States Article 5 application. It passed the resolution with overwhelming support from the House. House members nearly trampled Representative Drew Darby as they rushed to add their names as co-sponsors. And most Republican states have now followed the Lone Star State's leadership to join the growing nationwide movement. There's just one problem. Texas passed the resolution with an expiration date, and it runs out this year. Missouri removed their expiration date, as did Oklahoma, and Nebraska is working to remove theirs. That would leave Texas as the only state to still have an expiration date on their Convention of States resolution. That just can't happen. Texas leadership is united in supporting Convention of States. Governor Greg Abbott.
Article 5 of the Constitution was included by the founders for this exact time, when we, the people, would need the ability to rein in an out-of-control federal government.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
The Convention of States legislation will ensure that going forward, our government will remain rooted in constitutional principles and will remain a government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Attorney General Ken Paxton. Speaker Dustin Burrows. Congressman Chip Roy.
Strong supporter of Convention of States dating back to my time working with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, trying to advance Convention of States around the country, including when we passed Texas.
Former president of TPPF and current Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins.
The American people are mad, and they're looking for a way to say no more. And our founders, in their brilliance, gave us a tool to do that, and it's an Article 5.
Former president of TPPF and current president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts.
One of the reasons that my family and I moved back to Austin, which is our adopted hometown, is because of the opportunity to work on Convention of States. And thereafter, in addition to the other work that we did at Texas Public Policy.
Heritage, maybe having something to do with my being there the last few years, has become a sponsor of the Convention of States, because we realize the objective isn't just short term, it's long term. And I know that President Trump and Vice President Vance are thinking about that.
The new administration is being populated with Convention of States endorsers, including Vice President J.D. Vance Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The heavy hand of the feds is hurting our businesses, our economy, our education system, and it's also why I'm a supporter of the Convention of States.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
You were an early supporter of Article 5, Convention of States.
Absolutely. Article 5 created a mechanism by which people could take charge of the Republic and course correct using the Constitution as a way to further limit government.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
Because I truly believe that Convention of States, this organization, this movement, and this moment is the vehicle by which us patriots can preserve our republic given to us by our founders.
And more.
So I strongly believe that a Convention of the States empowers the people of America to get some things done that they've long wanted. Never going to get it as long as we put it in the hands of Congress.
First is Article 5 Convention. That's internal to the Constitution. That's within the system and how it's supposed to work. I'd say have it. I'd like to be there. And let's actually have that debate in the open.
President Trump posted in his own social media feed a clip of Mark Levin's strong endorsement, where Levin states that he is a leader in the Convention of States movement with his good friend Mark Meckler.
I've been involved as one of the leaders in the Convention of States movement with our friend Mark Meckler, over 5 million members.
It's time for Texas to remove the expiration clause on Convention of States. This is a time for Texas to lead, not retreat. HJR 22 and SJR 41 would remove the expiration date and keep Texas in the Convention of States movement until the necessary 34-state threshold is reached. HJR 98 and SJR 54 are clean resolutions with no expiration clauses. Texas, don't let Convention of States expire, because liberty never expires. Support House Joint Resolution 22, Senate Joint Resolution 41, Senate Joint Resolution 54, and House Joint Resolution 98 by signing the Convention of States petition at conventionofstates.com.
Wow, Rita. I mean, gosh, hat tip to producer G. That video is incredible.
Yeah.
So we kind of jumped back to talk about the sunset clause that Texas is trying to remove right now. But there's something in that video that I think we haven't talked about today, and that's the number of endorsers that we have at convention, and not just the number, the caliber of our endorsers. So there's, we've run into some roadblocks in state legislatures that we're working on, and then we're removing those roadblocks. But something that we have been doing that's just incredible is the number of people who are political thinkers or people who are in the public sphere who support conventions. I mean, I can't list all of them, but there was Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Caroline Leavitt, and these are people who are in the Trump administration, mind you.
Yeah.
But then there was Brooke Rollins from Texas Public Policy Foundation. There was the Heritage Foundation president, Kevin Roberts. I mean, the list was just huge on all of the people who are supporting this, who are behind this movement.
Right. And Andrew, I didn't see this in the video. That was the first time I'd seen that video.
Me too.
It was dynamite. And I have lots of ideas for how I want to use parts of it. But I didn't see this. It could have been there and I missed it. But also Vice President J.D. Vance. I don't remember which year it was, but he filled out a candidate survey, one of our candidate surveys when he was running for office, and indicated that if elected, he would support a convention of states. So the vice president is, on the record as supporting convention of states. And you mentioned some of the other big ones. I don't know if you mentioned Senator Rand Paul. Then, of course, we've got people like Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, Governor Mike Dunleavy, Governor Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott. We saw him there wearing the COS button. I loved seeing that. Just so many high-profile, quality, credentialed COS supporters. I love seeing that. And Andrew, you mentioned Speaker Johnson, and that's an exciting one. And he actually, I think it was just last year, the year before, held a hearing to talk about an Article 5 convention to sort of
Congress.
Yes, right.
Oh, I love that.
Amazing. It was a great hearing. And I think producer G has some video footage about Speaker Johnson's support, right?
The Speaker-elect, Mike Johnson from the state of Louisiana. Congressman Mike Johnson, the 56th Speaker of the House, is a longtime advocate for Article 5 of the Constitution and the Convention of States movement.
The People's House is back in business.
Before he was a congressman, as a state legislator in the Louisiana House of Representatives, Johnson was instrumental in helping Louisiana successfully pass the Convention of States Action Resolution.
I have come to this conclusion myself after lots of study, prayer, and deliberation. This is what I do. I'm a constitutional lawyer. I was reluctant in the beginning, but I have come to the conclusion myself, for me, that this is the measure of last resort. And my friends, to me, we are at the last resort.
The COS Action Resolution would call an Article 5 convention to propose amendments for term limits, fiscal restraints, and other limits on federal control.
The greatest threat to our national security is our nation's debt. That debt has crossed almost $33.6 trillion. And the time that it's going to take me to deliver this speech will go up another $20 million in debt. It's unsustainable, regardless of political ideology. I think one thing most of us in this room could agree on is that the government has grown too large. And they put this safeguard in there. They said, look, we want the power to be reserved to the people. Lincoln said, government of the people, by the people, for the people. The only way to ensure that is to have the safeguard in the Constitution that the states get the final say.
In September 2023, just weeks before he was elected as Speaker, Congressman Johnson chaired an important congressional hearing on Article 5 and the Convention of States movement. He continues to raise awareness of this important constitutional solution.
An amendment may be proposed by 2/3 of the states, and a convention called for that purpose. To date, no such convention has ever been called, but efforts have been underway in recent years to do so. We have to bring relief to the American people by reining in federal spending and bringing down inflation. This is our chance. As I said, I came to this conclusion myself reluctantly, but I'm there. I think we have to do it.
From the great state of Louisiana and the 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson.
62 yeas and 36 nays, and the resolution's been adopted.
Join Mike Johnson in supporting the solution that's as big as the problem by signing the petition at www.conventionofstates.com/speaker. That's www.conventionofstates.com/speaker.
Rita, I remember when that video came out, and it was, oh man, I just love it so much because you see Speaker Johnson there. They're in like a committee hearing, and they're talking about Convention of States. It's like we're behind enemy lines, talking about how we're going to limit their power and limit the terms of office that they can serve. And I just love that so much. What are your thoughts? Oh, looks like we might have lost Rita. Well, something that I love about Convention of States and what we're doing is that we have people on the ground everywhere who are making progress, and we have people like Speaker Johnson, who started out in the state legislature in Louisiana. I believe he even helped us get passed in that state. He helped our resolution work its way. You heard him in the video, by the way, talk about how he was reluctant to support this, and then he moved from being reluctant to being an avid supporter and a champion for Article 5. And then he moved from just being kind of like on the sidelines to helping it get passed in the Louisiana legislature. And now look at him, moved all the way to Congress. He's now the Speaker of the House, and he is a champion for Convention of States. I mean, that's just an absolutely incredible thing to see, that we have someone who's at one of the highest rungs of power, a supporter and champion for Convention of States. So even though we've ran into several roadblocks in state legislatures, that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is going to be us getting to convention, us passing amendments out of convention, getting those amendments ratified, and radically changing our form of government so that we can get Congress. It's not really radical, because it's actually just getting Congress to do what it was supposed to do, which our founding fathers believe that it should be limited. But when we get to there, that will be the end of, not the end of the story, but that will be where our mission is supposed to take us. Anyway, we have another video lined up. Looks like Producer G's got some New Hampshire committee vote that we're going to look at. It has never been released before, and we're going to comment on that in just a few moments, and we'll get Rita back on.
Okay, one down, 6 to go. The next one is a bigger one, I think we could say. It's HCR 3, which involves applying for a convention of the states under Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States. HCR 3, Article 5 Convention. I'm looking again to Representative Belcher for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move on to pass.
Motion from Representative Belcher is OTP, ought to pass. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Representative Mannion. Representative Belcher, would you care to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this motion calls for the application of an Article 5 convention under specific yet relatively wide enough terms to look to solve some problems. Now, I'll offer my own no-nonsense assessment here, which is honestly, I am a little bit skeptical that it will be successful in ultimately reining in the federal government, but I'm also very skeptical that there's much danger involved. Actually, the reason that there's not much danger involved is the same reason that I'm a little bit skeptical about the efficacy of it. That said, there is an awful lot of decent people who want the opportunity to try. I see no good reason to deprive them of that opportunity, and I do very much hope they prove me wrong.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Mannion.
To echo, to me, it's like the specifics of this bill, of this specific application, are very good because the debt is insane right now. It is like one of the largest security threats to the country right now, the destabilization of the dollar. I think we need to do everything in our power, and that means from the state's perspective, so be it. We should move forward with something like this.
Thank you, Representative. My brief comment is, I have two comments, one of which, to be clear, there are a lot of folks I hear saying that an Article 5 convention is unconstitutional. So I have to, as a civics person, I have to say that an Article 5 convention would be the least unconstitutional action I think could be taken, because Article 5 is from the Constitution. It's specifically, it's Article 5 of the United States Constitution. So the notion that it would be unconstitutional, that in my opinion is, I agree with the founders who put it in the Constitution, that it could not be more constitutional in my humble opinion. And the other point I want to make is that we have spent a lot of time on this, those of us who've been on this committee for several terms. It passed this committee in a bipartisan fashion last term. It did not pass the full floor or the full House, but I do need to point out that this is a measure that has passed this committee before last term. Other thoughts, comments, questions on any piece of this? Is that a hand up, Representative Gagne? You carry on, scratch that ear. Any other comments on this? Seeing none, then we have a motion and we have a second, and we will have a vote, Madam Clerk. But I'll repeat the motion, and you feel free to do as well, so that everyone watching and listening knows what is happening. So the motion is OTP on HCR 3, House Concurrent Resolution 3, applying for a convention of the states under Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States.
Vice Chairman Rollins.
Yes.
Representative Dolan.
Yes.
Representative Giesen.
Yes.
Representative Gagne.
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
Representative Belcher.
Yes.
Representative Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Hemingway.
Yes.
Representative Plant.
Yes.
Representative Seibert.
No.
Representative Judy is not here. Myself, I vote yeah or no. Representative Jones.
No.
Representative Lane.
No.
Shoot, I did this again. Representative Jones, do you mind clarifying your vote one more time?
No.
Thank you. Representative Budataki.
No.
Representative Harnett.
No.
Representative Juris.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The vote is 9-7. Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry. This is why I'm not
The
clerk.
chair votes yes.
Thank you. 10-7. The vote is 10-7. Yes.
So, Andrew, what producer G just showed our viewers there was never before seen video footage of the New Hampshire House Committee vote that happened a week or two ago. And as you just saw, our application was passed by that House Committee by a vote of 10-7. I was pleasantly surprised, to be honest with you, Andrew. I thought that we might make it out just barely by one vote. So to see that 10-7 result, I was super excited and pleased with that. So we are still pending in the New Hampshire House. And I can tell you that Senator Rick Santorum is headed up to New Hampshire early next week to meet with some legislators, answer their questions, talk to them about our application and about the Article 5 process. And I would love to see us get some traction in New Hampshire this year, Andrew. It's a really tough state because it's a huge legislature. They have over 400 representatives in the tiny state of New Hampshire. So it's just a real challenge for any grassroots team to do outreach to that many legislators and educate them, provide them with the information they need about our application. But I do know that our team is working hard to do exactly that. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's it. Yeah, huge legislature, a lot of work to do. I don't think Rick's gonna be able to get to every single legislator when he goes there next week. But you know what? Working on some key ones is really important. And gosh, Rick, again, I mentioned this earlier. Rick is just going everywhere. He was in Des Moines not long ago, going over to New Hampshire next week. He went to South Dakota, Wyoming. I mean, he's been everywhere. Yeah. So it's just great to see that we have such a champion in Senator Rick Santorum, he's traversing the United States in support of our Article 5 resolution. It's incredible.
And it really speaks to his passion for this work and his commitment. You know, he routinely tells legislators, I'm here because I've been in Congress and I don't believe there is the ability to fix the nation in Congress. I believe that power now is here in the states. It's the Article 5 power, and we need you to use it. So I love hearing him give that empowering and motivational testimony. Andrew, for anyone who's just tuning in, we started this broadcast over an hour ago, which is when the Iowa House State Government Committee was scheduled to begin their meeting. They had on their agenda just a couple of things. There was a brief presentation from an agency that was going to happen, and then a formality of reading through some subcommittee assignments, and then one bill, and then our COS application. We're still waiting. They are now in caucus, which is why you're not seeing any footage from the hearing room right now. Karen Schuster, who is on the ground there to watch this unfold, just texted me a few minutes ago that the doors are still closed, which means they're still caucusing. Not sure what they're talking about in there, but hopefully they're going to start back soon. And at that point, I believe it'll just be the one bill that's before ours, then the discussion and debate and vote on our COS application. And again, in Iowa, at this full committee stage, they do not take testimony. So it'll just be the legislators talking about the COS application. I believe this committee is also scheduled to discuss and vote on our 34 Ready legislation, which is pending right now in Iowa. It's also pending in Nebraska and will be considered by the Nebraska committee later this afternoon, where Mark Meckler will testify in support of that, as well as in support of a COS application that removes our sunset clause from Nebraska. So, we've talked a little bit today, Andrew, about 34 Ready and what it is, but I do know that we have a little video that explains what it is. So, given all of these hearings where it's going to be coming up, I think it would be great if Producer G could cue that video for us. Hi, I'm Rita Peters. I'm Senior Vice President for Legislative Affairs with Convention of States Action, and I'm here to talk to you about our 34 Ready initiative. The Constitution says that when 2/3 of the states, that's 34 states, call for an Article 5 convention to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution, that convention will be called. When that happens, all 50 states will send delegates, properly called commissioners, to the Article 5 convention. Who will select the commissioners? How many will there be? How will they receive instructions? Ideally, all 50 states will have legislation on the books answering these questions before the convention is called. Introducing 34 Ready. 34 Ready is 2 pieces of model legislation developed by Convention of States Action's team of constitutional law experts. The first piece of legislation establishes a recommended process for selecting, instructing, and overseeing commissioners to an Article 5 convention. The second piece is a bill enacting criminal penalties for commissioners who violate their commission, or for individuals interfering with the commissioner's performance of his or her duties. 34 Ready is designed so that each state legislature can adapt the language according to its unique needs and preferences. This model legislation provides a starting point for states to establish how the delegation from their state would function at an Article 5 convention. Encourage your state legislators to pass 34 Ready in your state so that your state will be 34 Ready. To learn more and download our model legislation, visit conventionofstates.com/34 Ready. Okay.
Rita, that was a nice treat. We got to see you. We don't ever get to see you on video like that. So that was awesome.
I'm going to be honest, Andrew. I kind of forgot that the video was me. Producer G does so many videos, and I recorded that one a while ago and had forgotten. So to those of you who are really getting tired of the sound of my voice, like myself, I'm sorry. But there you have it. One thing I want to emphasize about the 34 Ready, we put together this model legislation, but it really is designed for the state legislators to make it their own. They do. They might decide, we want 3 commissioners to represent us, or we want 7 commissioners. They might change up the way the instructions are given, or they might change the wording of the oath that they want to apply. While we suggest doing, the one piece as a resolution and then the criminal penalties piece as a bill, some states decide to do the whole thing in one. And actually, Iowa is one of those states. So in Iowa, we mentioned already that we were pretty sure the 34 Ready bill sponsored by Representative Megan Jones is on the agenda for this Iowa House State Government Committee today, if they ever finish caucusing and come back. And Karen Schuster has just actually confirmed for me that it is on the agenda. So hopefully we will get to hear the committee members actually discuss the version of this 34 Ready legislation in Iowa. And I can tell you that Michael Ferris personally worked with Representative Megan Jones in Iowa to make some edits to our model and make it exactly what Representative Jones wanted it to be for Iowa. For instance, she wanted to include a lot of definitions at the beginning, just making it very clear what this is that we're talking about, what we mean by the different terms. I thought that was a great idea. She wanted to cover lots of detail. Some states might decide to cover less detail and leave more, open to interpretation. So every state can really use these models and make them their own. And Andrew, one of the ways we suggest that our teams use the 34 Ready legislation in particular is for a state where it might be stuck in getting any progress with the Convention of States application. And I think you might have some states that are in that situation. What's your experience in using 34 Ready models?
So right now we have 2 states in my region that are pursuing 34 Ready. We haven't found a sponsor yet. Well, let me back up and explain which states that are pursuing this. California is pursuing 34 Ready in addition to Oregon. That's another state that's pursuing 34 Ready. And so right now we're just in the planting seed phase for both of those states, where our state teams are going into the legislature, talking to legislators about 34 Ready and how they can start clarifying some of the process of choosing commissioners and setting some rules for what the commissioners have to follow when they go to a future convention. So those are the 2 states that are working, and California is doing that because it's really difficult for us in that state. A lot of roadblocks. But one thing that's really interesting is the California legislature is not necessarily against Article 5, because if you remember, Rita, there was an Article 5 application passed a couple of years ago, not one that we really support. It's a Article 5 application to put additional restrictions on gun ownership in the Second Amendment. So it's not something that we necessarily support. In fact, we don't support that. But got to get that in there, right? In case it wasn't clear. But you know what? The California legislature at least has demonstrated that they see the value in Article 5 and that it can be used as a tool to pass amendments. Now, of course, we want them to consider different amendments that would limit the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government. But hey, we see this as an opportunity to go talk to legislators and say, hey, you already have an Article 5 application that you recently passed. Have you considered how you're going to choose your delegates? Have you considered what to do in case delegates go to the convention and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing? So this is, I think, really a great piece of legislation for, like you said, states that have stalled out or states that have a really, really tough hill to climb. And Oregon, again, the state director there, Andrew Shooks, he's working really hard to find a sponsor for 34 Ready. Nothing set in stone yet, but we do have some promising leads there.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love hearing about how the state teams are using that. And as you point out, Andrew, it's, people of any political persuasion should be able to support it, because it's not about policy. It's about a procedure and a process that needs to be defined, because eventually I believe we will have an Article 5 convention. And so the states need to be prepared for how they will select, instruct, and oversee their commissioners. And Andrew, I want to mention too, there's another function that I've seen the 34 Ready legislation play. And I wasn't, really thinking of this when we put it together and first started working on it, but it's really interesting to see the legislators, or even members of the public who come out and testify in opposition to the Convention of States application, who claim that the reason they're opposed is because they don't know how the process will work. And what if the delegates go rogue, and who's going to be in charge of the delegates, and how will they be instructed? And, they throw up all these questions and act like the uncertainty of the process is why they don't support Article 5. And then they come out and testify against the very legislation that puts additional procedural protections and specifications into the state's law or pass it as a resolution. And they're opposed to that. And so, Andrew, I think it is incredibly revealing of what is that there's something else, that you're not going to get these people by reasoning. You're not going to get them by logic or by, providing legal protections and certainty. You're just not going to get them because they're scared, Andrew, and they're just not going to be pacified by anything. So I do you find that as humorous as I do?
Oh, that is high level comedy, and it's great. We want to see our opposition, fly their true colors, and the true colors are they just don't like it, and they'll do anything they can to make sure that it doesn't happen. They'll tear down the founding and say that the 1787 convention was a runaway. They'll say that the Constitution should be revered, except Article 5 can't revere that one. So they will say anything. They'll call the founders, scoundrels, saying that they disobeyed their commissions. They will do anything to try and leverage legislators to be against this, and it's sad. It's really sad to see it. But you know what? The truth will be revealed. We are, we're shining a light on this process. We're shining a light on how we can use it to limit the federal government, and more people are seeing it. And so it's just a matter of time before we get state number 20, 21, 20, and all the way to 34, because we got the people behind us. And Rita, we have polling that shows that 80% of the people in the United States agree with term limits. And that, and there's similar support in the other two planks of our resolution. And that tells me a lot. One, that tells me that there's a lot of support for us, but it tells me that this is a possibility that we can get this thing done, because if you look at amendments historically, they usually have about 80% of the population supporting it. And we're right there. We're right at that 80% threshold. Yeah. So our opponents, they can fight and squirm as much as they want, but you can't change the fact that 80% of the people want to see this thing happen. They want term limits. They want the federal government to spend within its means, and they want power to be diffused among the several states like it was supposed to be. So I think our opponents, they don't got much of a limb to stand on when it comes to this.
Yeah, that's right. And the interesting thing, Andrew, about the polling is that the polling shows that a majority support what we're trying to do across party lines.
Yeah.
The level of support is not quite as high among Democrats as it is for Republicans, but it is a majority of Democrats polled in a national scientific, official sampling poll showed that majority of Democrats, majority of independents, majority of Republicans all support what we're trying to do. And so eventually the legislators, I think, are going to catch on and realize this is what the people really do want them to do. And Andrew, in the meantime, when we suffer losses and setbacks and defeats with what we're trying to do, I just want to emphasize what you said a minute ago, is that we are shining a light on this Article 5 constitutional process. And that is a benefit to the people of America. It is a benefit to the state legislators. It's a benefit to our country. Even when we don't get the votes we need to pass, we are doing something important. We are doing something good. And I want to say that by way of thanking our incredible grassroots across this country who, are taking time off of work, taking time out of their retirement, expending their energy, sometimes their financial resources, to go and show up and testify at a committee hearing in the middle of the week, sometimes in very cold places, very cold and snowy places. I just really appreciate them and admire them, and they're doing it because they care about America and they believe in this process. Mm-hmm. Andrew, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Rita, we got another video that producer G is going to put up in just a moment. And what's really cool at Convention of States is we've been talking now about what we do as far as getting our Article 5 application introduced, we talked about 34 Ready, which is another piece of legislation that we support. But we do more than just support our Article 5 resolution in 34. We're also out there supporting legislation that doesn't necessarily pertain to convention of states, but legislation that's all about freedom, fundamental rights, and federalism. And it's called F3. It's something that you and Paul Phillips have been working on. You've been putting together, and it's really supposed to be for states that maybe have stalled out, or states that have already passed our Article 5 application. So producer G has a video that kind of outlines F3. So he's going to play that, and we'll comment on it in just a few minutes.
At Convention of States Action, our mission is to restore a culture of self-governance in America. That means we, the people, taking responsibility for our communities and states, rather than letting government run our lives. We believe this will produce a more vibrant America, a nation free to flourish. Self-governance is more than a convention. That's why our state teams support legislation outside of our model application for an Article 5 convention. We call it F3 legislation. When approved by the national COS legal and legislative teams, the state teams can use COS resources to support or oppose legislation which affects federalism, freedom, and fundamental rights. COS teams have already helped their states successfully pass legislation on topics such as parental rights or election integrity. We believe citizens have far more influence in their local community and their state than they ever will over DC. However, F3 is also an opportunity to impact elected officials who eventually become involved in national politics. Those who serve in federal positions almost always start out in local or state politics. F3 encompasses the process by which our national and state COS teams can engage in local and state politics to protect our way of life. By getting engaged in local and state politics in strategic ways, we can restore a culture of self-governance in America from the bottom up. To learn more, please visit conventionofstates.com/F3. Okay, so I did remember that one was going to be me. So again, I'm sorry to our viewers. We had no idea this morning that the Iowa House State Government Committee was going to do a very long caucus meeting in the middle of their committee meeting. So we're still here.
Hey, Rita, but look at the bright side. We get to showcase all of the amazing videos that producer G has put together, because all of these are put together by producer G. And he's the man behind the curtain, turning the wheels and spinning the dials and all of that stuff. And boy, gosh, he just does an amazing job. So at least we get to showcase some amazing videos by COS.
Absolutely. Producer G is a national treasure, and I'm so glad we have him. I don't know what we would do without him. And by the way, those who are making nice comments to encourage me and Andrew while we stall, thank you for your nice comments. It's very encouraging. F3 is a great way for the state teams to really stay engaged after their state has passed the Article 5 application, or potentially in a state where it's just stalled out and they need something else to work on. Because again, at Convention of States, we're actually about much more than just a convention. We're about building and training a grassroots army of citizen activists who are self-governing. And that requires opportunities for that grassroots army to be engaged in what's happening in the legislature We do partner whenever we can with our friends, especially our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom and the Heritage Foundation, who do the hard work of, putting together good, strong legislation and vetting legislation, training our sponsors on how to advocate for it. And so it's always a pleasure when we can add our grassroots effort to their efforts. And help just get good legislation passed that is important to our grassroots teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that I love about it is what you just kind of mentioned is that um, we're more than a convention, and we have a button, a big COS button that you usually see at committee hearings, or you'll see them at rallies, and you'll see them just people wearing them out doing events, and it says more than a convention. And that's that's us living that MO out, right? Because if our mission statement is to grow a strong, engaged army of self-governing activists, we're going to have to do more. We're going to have to do more than just getting our Article 5 application introduced or getting 34 Ready introduced. We have to support legislation that's going to be good for the country or good for the state. So that's something that I really love about that. It's just us actually, talking the talk and walking the walk when it comes to being more than a convention, instead being a grassroots movement for self-governance. So it's amazing to see that.
Yeah. And the legislators are seeing that and taking notice too. Again, we don't go away. Even after we get our Article 5 application passed in a state, we still don't go away. We just start to work on other things with our legislators there. So I love that about what we do.
No kicking our feet up on the table, that's for sure.
No, not ever.
Rita, we have another video from Producer G. I think we're going to be looking at some footage from Justice Scalia and a few others. So Producer G, if you have that one.
Yeah, actually, Andrew, I think before we get to that one, we're going to back up and show footage from Ohio, from the Ohio Senate just this morning. As I mentioned at the beginning of our broadcast, the Ohio legislature does multiple hearings on a single bill or resolution. And the first hearing is always where just the sponsor introduces the bill or resolution to the committee, explains to them, why they're introducing it, what it's all about. That happened for us this morning in the Ohio Senate, where one of our Senate sponsors, Senator Michelle Reynolds, introduced our application to the committee there. And we didn't broadcast that live because we knew it was going to be short and it was just going to be our sponsor for a few minutes. But Producer G, as always, was watching and did record it for us. So Producer G, if you have that, love to see that video.
All right, first we have first hearing for Senate Joint Resolution 3, sponsored by Senators Reynolds and Lang. Senator Reynolds. Welcome to committee, and you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Chairwoman Rogner, Vice Chair Gavarone, and Ranking Member Blackshear Jr., and members of the General Government Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide sponsor testimony on Senate Joint Resolution 3. This resolution urges Congress to call a convention of the states under Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States. The root frustration felt by citizens across America is that our federal government does whatever it wants, and there is nothing ordinary citizens can do about it. It doesn't seem to matter who they send to represent them in Washington, D.C. They have lost control of their government. A convention of states will address 3 critical issues. Number 1, imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government. Number 2, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And 3, establishing term limits for federal officials and members of Congress. If passed, Ohio would join 19 other states that have already approved this resolution, including Florida, Georgia, Alaska, Alabama, Tennessee, Indiana, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arizona, North Dakota, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, Utah, Mississippi, Wisconsin, Nebraska, West Virginia, and South Carolina. While there is nothing wrong with our Constitution, The problems we face today are undeniably the result of constitutional interpretations that capitalize on ambiguities in the wording of certain phrases, such as the General Welfare Clause. The federal government doesn't ignore the Constitution, it takes advantage of loopholes created through practice and precedent. The only way to close these loopholes definitively is through constitutional amendments that reinstate limitations on federal power in clear modern language. Some express concerns about a potential runaway convention. However, the process contains numerous redundant protections, such as the scope of authority is defined by the 34 applications that trigger the convention. Number 2, state legislatures can recall delegates who exceed their authority. And number 3, any proposals would require ratification by 38 states. This systemic problem requires a systemic solution. The founders anticipated federal overreach and gave states a constitutional tool to address it. As George Mason insisted at the 1787 Constitutional Convention, states need a way to propose amendments when the federal government has become too powerful. As Ronald Reagan said, "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. Will we preserve for our children this and the last best hope of man on earth, or will we sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness?" I want to thank my joint sponsor, Senator Lang, for his leadership on this resolution. And to the entire committee, thank you for your time and consideration as we work to preserve our constitutional republic for future generations, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
So, Rita, that was Ohio testimony from this morning, correct?
Correct. That was our Ohio Senate sponsor, one of them, Senator Michelle Reynolds. And that's just the first stage of the process in Ohio, which is that they invite just the sponsor to introduce the resolution to the committee. So that was Senator Reynolds doing that. Looked like she did an amazing job. She was actually at our last simulated convention, and she was excited to be there. I think maybe that was really her first foray into the whole world of Article 5, and she was obviously impressed by her experience and her, conviction that the process is safe and effective and is what we need to do. So we're excited to have her as a primary sponsor. And Andrew, just to give a quick update to our viewers, I am hearing from Karen Schuster, who's on the ground in Iowa, that the committee members are trickling back in. We think they have finished caucusing, and we think they're going to be starting any minute. And Karen is telling us that the bills that we will see first, or the resolutions, are going to be just ours and the 34 Ready bill that I had mentioned earlier, which you'll hear referred to as HF 438, with Representative Megan Jones as the sponsor of that bill. And I don't know why we don't have video or audio, but I'm getting word that it just passed 13-10.
Wow.
So I don't know. Maybe the tech folks in the committee room have fallen down on the job, but yeah, we passed 13-10 out of the Iowa House State Government Committee, which
Is that for both, Rita? Is that for both the Article 5 and 34 Ready, or just the one?
I think that's just for Convention of States so far. I think, the messages, again, I'm just getting this from text messages from Karen on the ground. And I apologize to our viewers. I don't know what happened. I can only surmise that the committee technicians failed to get the video and audio feed going again after they came back from their caucus. What a disappointment that was.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say there must not have been a ton of discussion, because it seems like it happened quickly. I see we have Catherine Zamanek. Catherine, can you tell us any more about what just happened and how we missed it?
Well, thank goodness for texting, Rita, right? Because you and I have both been getting texts this morning with updates, but I have no idea what happened, why we weren't able to see it. I'm not surprised that they did it this way, though. It seemed that caucus went on for quite some time, and I figured that maybe they were just going to come in and get this done quickly. So 13 to 10 on the resolution. I didn't hear about the 34 ready commissioner selection yet. Maybe we can get clarification from Karen. Hopefully she'll be able to come on and give us a report on that. But yeah, that was when I looked at the agenda, the 34 ready was scheduled first. And I think Megan Jones wanted that. So, but how exciting for Iowa today. They've worked so hard, and this is a great victory. I'm really curious to see who those 13 are. Love to give credit where credit is due from these Iowa legislators. So super excited. Big day for Iowa.
Yeah. Absolutely. Super exciting. And again, we weren't necessarily expecting the margin of victory to be that big. So that's exciting. I thought it would probably be just a 1-vote margin. So we did better than expected. Pleased about that. But of course, we still have work to do to get through the House in Iowa. I know that we need our Iowa folks contacting their legislators. We need to get those votes locked down. But the next step for Iowa will be the full Iowa House of Representatives. And we're not sure yet when that will happen, but stay tuned and we'll keep you posted. Catherine, any final comments from you on what happened today or what's going to happen next?
I'm really excited to hear the debate on the House floor in Iowa. As you've mentioned this morning, our great sponsor, John Wills, for the resolution, and of course, Megan Jones, who's now carrying the 34 ready. I am so excited to hear both of these legislators. They're both champions for what they believe on this. And I think that the time has come for Iowa to pass this, get it done. So if you're in Iowa, contact those legislators, let them know that now is the time for Iowa to join the Convention of States movement. Let's make them 20, or if they have to be 21, we'll take whatever number that we can get in Iowa.
Oh, Catherine, we love having you on. It's great that you were able to come give us some comment on this victory. You got to come back when Iowa becomes state number 20, or when Ohio becomes when Ohio gets some action. We love hearing your perspective and hearing what's going on in your states. Thank you so much.
And if I might add this also, absolutely. We have a hearing on Monday in Indiana for our 34 ready, and I'll be on the ground for that. And I know we don't broadcast that, but prayers to the people watching. If you could pray for the Indiana legislators in the House who are now taking this up, because we have passed the Senate, the full Senate over in Indiana. We're just making some modifications. Like Rita mentioned earlier, the number of commissioners was an issue. So what we've done in Indiana is we've asked for them to modify the number 2, and they chose 3 commissioners. So, that's what Indiana is going to do. It's a great resolution that they have set over there. I think that Indiana's been kind of the model for this, and so they're leading. We have a great sponsor over there with Senator Holdman, wonderful, wonderful champion of Convention of States. So we ask for prayers for Indiana as well.
Well, you'll have them, Catherine. And, if you're watching, thanks for sticking with us. It was a crazy ride this morning. And, tune back in this afternoon, because at 2:30 Eastern time, we think the Nebraska committee is going to be hearing the application, which would remove the sunset from our Nebraska COS application, as well as a 34 ready bill. And we do have Mark Meckler on the ground there in Nebraska to give testimony. So hopefully there won't be this long, weird caucus behind closed doors thing in the middle of that hearing. And we'll just hear some straight up testimony from Mark as well as our Nebraska team. So, Andrew?
You know, Rita and Andrew, I've enjoyed this today. I've been tuned in and loving the videos from producer G, loving the commentating from you two. You know, we're learning a great deal as we watch all of this stuff, and I think you've given us an update on this huge movement that's going on this year for Convention of States. So it's been fun. Thanks for letting me come along for the ride.
Thanks, Catherine.
All right, Rita. Well, I think we better wrap up for now. Like you said, we'll be back in a little bit. This has been quite a ride, been a lot of fun commenting on several things. Great to have Catherine with us for a little bit. But I think we ought to wrap up for now, and we'll be back with Nebraska and the sunset provision. So for now, we have a country to save, so it's time to get back to work. We'll see you in a few hours.